And we are live. Welcome to another webinar of Dataminded to talk about OVHcloud today. While people are still coming in, let's maybe quickly introduce myself and introduce the two guests. So I'm Kris, I'm the CEO of Dataminded. Yeah, there's not much more to say about that, I think. And I have Gergely and Niels with me. Can you also say who you are and what you do?
Hello, so my name is Gergely, and I'm a lead engineer at Dataminded, and I've been also leading this whole effort around OVHcloud in the past couple of months.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'm Niels. I'm also one of the lead data engineers at Dataminded, and I work mainly on our products. So internally, I'm not a consultant most of my time.
All right, cool. Maybe we can start sharing the presentation. Do we start with the Mentimeter?
We start with your presentation.
Okay.
We start with.
Well, let's. Do we do the presentation first or the Menti? Now I'm confused.
You had your one slide you wanted to show before the Menti.
Yeah, exactly. So can you add that to the? Yeah. It's coming in, guys. While people are still coming in. So we always do Menti in the beginning of the. Maybe I can do it.
That's fine.
You're fine. All right. We always do a Menti in the beginning of the presentation to see what people are expecting of the webinar. But before we do a Menti, I want to share this LinkedIn post that I saw earlier from the CEO of Wire. And apparently, the Microsoft marketing team claims that your data stays in Europe. You don't have to move to another cloud. We have European data centers. But then when they were asked under oath, like the legal director was asked, like, okay, is that really true? Can you guarantee that your data will never leave Europe? And it's like, okay, you cannot guarantee it. And I found this interesting. I looked up the actual Senate hearings in the French Parliament or whatever, and you can. The link is below. We'll share the slides afterwards, so you get to see them. And it's actually there actually logged that indeed under oath, you cannot guarantee that your data is leaving the EU. And I think this is a good entry point for why I think we in the EU should start thinking about what are alternatives to the hyperscalers, right? And don't get us wrong, we love building solutions on AWS, we love building solutions on Azure, on GCP. We've done so for years, we will continue to do so. So they're great technologies, right? This is not a thing on them, but there is, I think, some trends that you cannot deny these days that you need to look at geopolitics a bit more. And that's why we decided to dive into what is possible today in OVHcloud. And then our focus is data, of course, with Dataminded. So we look at, okay, can we build a data platform on OVHcloud, right? That was a bit the approach. So the two gentlemen here have prepared a presentation, but before we go there, we're going to go to Mentimeter. So I'm going to quickly share my screen as well. Here we go. This one. Yeah. All right. So if you can go to menti.com and fill out that code, everyone is listening 77121105, or you can just scan the QR code with your cell phone. It's easier. I'll wait a bit until people have done that. We're going to ask just a few questions to understand why you're here, what you want to get out of the webinar. Okay, I'll wait a bit longer to make sure there's people there. By the way, in the meantime, I'm assuming everyone can hear us well. You can see us. There's a chat here in Webinar Geek, so if you can say, yeah, all is good. Hi, Katagai, welcome. Kagatai, welcome. Nice that you join. A new question has been asked. Okay, all is good. All right, so I think we're good. Let's go to the first question. Why are you considering EU-based cloud providers? So we just want to get an idea of what's in it for you. Is it you want a backup or failover scenario from a hyperscaler? Do you have a solution on-prem and you want to extend that on-prem capacity? Is it regulatory compliance? Is it cost? Is it another reason? We're curious why you're considering this. Okay. And by the way, if you just join and you have missed the QR code, you can still go to menti.com and the code is in the top, right? Okay, for there's 3 people who wrote other. Can you explain what is the reason that you're considering EU Cloud? And we missed it here. For the rest, regulatory requirements is definitely the number 1. With number 2, maybe have a backup and for the hyperscaler, right? Okay. Next question then. Which capabilities are you looking for in the data platform? What would you need if you're going to use a data platform in the EU Cloud? What would it need to be able to do? Right? Is it SQL processing? Is it containerized workloads like running Python or R jobs? Is it Spark, ML AI workloads, or any other workload? And I think you can, if I did it well, you can select multiple here, right? So you don't have to stay with one. Okay, that's interesting. So most of you Python and R, like containerized workloads, also a lot of ML AI workloads, and then SQL processing. Spark is again like
just a bit lower.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, Spark would always be number 1. Okay, that's interesting. And I see more people joining, by the way, so that's good. If you haven't joined already, go to menti.com and use that code, and you can still join the conversation. Also, the same for other workloads. You can leave in the chat what other workloads you want to do. I'm curious about them as well. Okay, but so the winner here is the containerized workloads and then SQL, ML, AI kind of stuff. All right. A final question, very open. What do you hope to get out of the webinar today? So if you leave in about an hour, what do you hope to have gotten out of it? In the meantime, I'll also check out the chat if they answered something. Other is go-to-market for me, eventing, more from an economical, political privacy reason that we need EU alternatives. Okay.
Eventing, you mean a streaming solution?
I guess so, Klaus. If you can, what do you mean with eventing? Is it real-time streaming? Okay. And let's check here. What do you want to learn today? Understand the basic how to build up such a stack. No vendor lock-in between OVH, Scaleway, etc.
No.
Understanding the issues and solutions for my company. How hard would it be to migrate workloads from Hyperscaler from EU CSP? That's a good question. What would be the associated cost? We might come back to that later in the Q&A. What alternatives to GCP, Azure, AWS are currently available? What level of maturity do these EU solutions have with respect to data clouds? Data management, how to make or build easy lakehouse, I guess that's lakehouse, with European cloud provider solution like OVH with Trino. Or is the management only considering hyperscalers? Consultants have a share of responsibility here. Ooh. As a consultant, I feel attacked. But I can maybe already answer that one, at least why we love working with the hyperscalers is, I don't know how long you've been into this, but I've been into data long enough that I know what it was to like run on-prem Hadoop systems. And I can tell you that the speed of innovation was 1% of what we can do now. Like instead of waiting months on the hardware and like babysitting your Hadoop cluster, now you just Terraform your cloud infrastructure, and it's not perfect. I mean, but the capabilities that they offer, there's nothing on-prem that can compare. So I do see a clear. Yeah, I'm a consultant, of course. I know, but I do see a very good reason why you would consider that, right? And then,
but yeah. I would maybe add to that I think nowadays that any cloud could speed up. I think that the on-prem situation, as you referred to some years ago, was mostly about the slowness of provisioning new compute resources and new databases and such. Nowadays, quite some clouds give you such opportunities. So I do think that there are alternatives.
Yeah, I'm going to touch them today.
Yeah, indeed. But then another angle might be that very often I think the cloud provider choice is decided on a very, very high level. Often even the CEO wants to say to his friends, "Oh, we are on Azure or we are on AWS." Or, I don't know, we already have Office 365 and Microsoft gave us a discount. So these kind of decisions just to get back to the consultancy responsibility here, I mean, indeed, we can say our opinion, we can provide feedback, but ultimately these choices are made often very, very high above our levels.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I think with that, we've done enough framing. We're going to switch to presentation mode. Feel free to keep on posting things in the chat or in the Q&A if things are not clear or if you have questions. So we want to make this as interactive as possible, right? I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then Niels, feel free to take over.
Yeah, I will. All right. So, okay. We had the Mentimeter. The why of the EU cloud providers, Kris already introduced it a bit before. We see in many of our clients, indeed, the geopolitical tension it became a catalyst at the moment to wonder what if. Also regulatory and legal requirements. We saw it also in the Menti. We see that with most of our clients, that's often a question mark. So that's why they are looking into considering EU clouds. And then on a more technical level, why are our clients looking into it? Yeah, we love, as we said, the US hyperscalers, but the more services that they use, they speed up development. You can deliver a lot of things faster, but it also locks you in way more tightly into their ecosystem, makes it very difficult to move away from it. So we looked from a different angle and said, okay, let's say that we want to build something that can run on any EU cloud provider, even on-prem. How would we design this data platform? So yeah, this is a very high level slide. We want to do batch streaming processing. You build your data pipelines, and in the end, you serve the result of those pipelines in a dashboard, in an API, in an ML model, whatever, to your end users. Very high level what the data platform could be, and we want to run this on any of the 4 clouds that are presented here. So how would we design this? The inspiration came a bit from a client we had from a project we had 2 years ago, or started 2 years ago, where we had this question: we need to move away, or we need to move a data platform or build a data platform on-prem. And there we started the foundations on, okay, which technologies would we use? And that's also the basis of what we're presenting here, because we were very happy with a couple of the components that we used there. So we are reusing them here and extending a bit on the platform that we used there. What did we learn, or what did we high level look at? If we say, okay, in order to be able to build a data platform, what do we need? I'm not the biggest infrastructure guy. I don't want to manage my own VMs. So as a data engineer, what do I want from a cloud provider or from an internal IT team in order to be efficient in what I'm good at, let's say? And then we came down to the conclusion that we want object storage, block storage as well, of course. We want a support for managing a database, because if we can manage this ourselves as well, but then the risk just increases. So ideally, this is offloaded to either another team or a cloud provider. And then we rely heavily on Kubernetes. And we see really that if a EU cloud provider supports Kubernetes as a base for compute, it also enables a lot of other functionality, because many of the managed services that US hyperscalers provide, there is an alternative in the open source ecosystem, and you can run that on top of Kubernetes, which reduces the impact, or basically makes it simpler to run it on EU cloud. So even if EU clouds have a lot less managed services, because Kubernetes is there and we know how to manage components on top of Kubernetes, we can get quite far with this. So that's the basic stack. What do we then need of a data platform? Today, I will show a smaller piece, and we don't go into all the components, but we say, okay, let's focus on SQL workloads. We need a query engine. We need a scheduler. We want to schedule our production workloads. We then need a data catalog. Where do we find the data? How do we get to the data? And then there is the identity and access management. In many of the US hyperscalers, people delegate this responsibility to the US hyperscaler. They have a lot of fine-grained control there. If we want something that is agnostic of an EU cloud or even managed on-prem, we need to do a lot more of that work ourselves. We need to bake this into the platform and cannot rely completely on the outer components to deliver that for us. Okay, so that's the high-level approach that we took. How does this now look in practice? Which technologies did we choose? So first of all, let's frame again. We want to focus on SQL workloads, and there are in this case two paths that users would interact with the platform. Either they want to do exploratory analysis; they take their favorite SQL interface, they connect to an endpoint, and they query the data that they want to get some insights. Once that's done and they have an idea, okay, this is what I want to build, you productionize this. Typically, in our case, it's dbt. We use Airflow to schedule this, and you have your production pipelines to do the processing. So how does this translate to our stack? So as a user, if I want to do a query, our SQL endpoint that we provide is Trino. Trino as our distributed SQL database. You could call it Presto Compute. There are a couple of things that we like about Trino. It's something that we've been running in production, so we have good experience with it, and we know that it performs, which is a very important aspect for us. It also mimics a bit the same approach that the Snowflakes and that the modern data warehouses of these days use, which is separating compute from storage. You store your data in blob storage, and you use this engine to just do the computations. And that makes it also flexible to use other compute engines. If you would do Spark, you would not need Trino, but you still can read your data on blob storage. And so it gives us also flexibility, and that's one of the reasons why Trino is for us a good fit. So if you as a user, you query, for example, your sales data. So what will Trino do? Another cool feature they have is this credential pass-through. So we can get the credentials of the user, and we can ask, does the user have access to read this data? And that access check that will, in our case, then be performed by OPA. It's an open policy agent. You can configure which rules do you want to apply. Basically, there you configure who has access to what. If you have access, then Trino can go forward, and then we can query the data. So that's a bit the exploratory data access that we support. And you see there that we also have Lakekeeper in. Lakekeeper supports it's actually an Iceberg catalog. So we support mainly Iceberg tables. So that's the focus point of this stack. There are some reasons for it, not to go into too much details now, but if you have questions, we can do that later. Which components I haven't mentioned yet? I haven't mentioned traffic. Well, traffic you can just see as your application proxy. It's not specifically traffic. You could use any other. If you use an Nginx Ingress, prefer that, fine. And then the last part is Citadel, and Citadel is our identity and access management. So that's the component where we would store the identities for the applications that query, where you also would make sure that the users have access, so that you can do these permission checks reliably. So that's a bit, in a nutshell, the scope of what we were testing out. So okay, these are all the components that we want in our stack that gives us SQL capabilities for our data platform. And we wanted to test out, okay, can we run this stack on any of the IOClouds, and we chose 4. We know that the stack is not complete. There are quite some extensions you could do. As the Mentimeter showed, a lot of people are interested in Spark or containerized workloads. You can extend that. So we see improvement points, notebook environments, running Spark workloads, container registries, monitoring, alerting, logging. Those are all extension points that are needed. We see a little risk there because we have built these stacks on the US hyperscalers with either open source managed components or with their managed services. We see little risk or little complexity. Well, it takes work, but we see a little risk there. And then on the other side, we have a bit more the question marks where we need some more further investigations before we can roll something out. And that's how would you do fine-grained access control on top of your storage? Make sure that you can really tie it down, not only for SQL queries, because there we have Trino already, but also for Python, or if you would use Spark workloads, how can you make sure that your Spark applications can only see the tables that they have access to and not everything else? There is some more technical details there to troubleshoot long-running jobs, API dashboards. If you're not depending on a US hyperscaler, you need to provide a solution for that as well. something we haven't looked into in depth, and also for ML, we haven't looked in for this scope. So yeah, now I will give the word to Gergely, who will talk a bit about the EU clouds we have investigated and how that went.
And by the way, people, so feel free to ask questions if things are not clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if there are any, we can maybe take some now, or otherwise we proceed with the.
No, at the moment there's nothing.
No. Okay. Good. Yeah. So when we were looking at these clouds overall, our idea was that so we knew that we wanted to use Kubernetes, and we like infrastructure as code, and we said, okay, we need to have Terraform, right? So these two are like the bare minimum, right? And of course, we would like to have object storage managed for us. We don't want to run our own object storage, right? So we were hoping that most of the clouds would have an S3 compatible storage engine, and we were also hoping that, hey, let's hope that they have also some kind of managed databases. So we did an initial survey, and we found these 4 providers. This is not an exhaustive list. This was done a bit internally. We found some providers. We found volunteers who would be working on those providers, and then these are the list that we came up with. And I must say that overall, I was surprised ultimately how good they are.
But it's an interesting observation, because indeed each of these offer these basic components. But then we talked to a client the other day, and he said, well, I was expecting way more managed services from these cloud providers. So compared to an AWS or an Azure, which has function apps and Lambda function API gateways and key value stores, and I mean, there's not too many. The core building blocks are there, but you need to build on top of that, right? Absolutely.
But this is also the part where you enter the vendor lock-in territory, right?
Yes.
So the moment you start using the API gateway, you don't have your own. So if they tell you, hey, use another cloud, well, suddenly you have to build another API gateway kind of solution elsewhere, right? But indeed, so for our little exercise here, the platform that Niels presented, we thought it would be universal enough to be able to deploy on a fairly, let's say, bare bones cloud provider.
Yeah. I think here it comes again back to this. Without Kubernetes, this would also not be possible at all. We would not have the flexibility to build any of this stack if they wouldn't support this. And so that's why less managed services, but with Kubernetes, we can take more of that hit and build it ourselves.
Indeed. So as we deploy this platform on all of these providers, we were looking around, and ultimately the Terraform, so the infrastructure as code aspect of all these providers was pretty good. At OVH, there was a little bit of hiccups, and there was a couple of gotchas that it's a bit non-standard, but ultimately their providers are good. They are maintained. If you look at GitHub, there's issues, there is pull requests, there's activity on all of them. So in that sense, it works quite well. You can spin up a Kubernetes cluster, like it doesn't take seconds because it takes a bit of time to boot, but like if I have to now spin up an OVH cluster in half an hour, I have it. So that's really good. Yeah. Now, in terms of features that we would maybe need for the platform, is a container registry, is a place to store your custom Docker images. Very often in an enterprise setting, you want your code not to be public. So you would want to have a container registry. Hopefully, you can run it your own, but you would want to have it. And Scaleway and OVH have a container registry themselves. But then, right, like you also maybe want to store your passwords also there. Like if you want to connect to a system to ingest an API, for example, you would want to put the password hopefully also in the cloud and not in your Git code. So only Scaleway offers a solution for that. And unfortunately, none of these providers offer a secure token service, meaning that it is harder or not so easy to scope your permissions in the console so that you're maybe almost always running as an admin. It's a bit more technical, but the moment you are starting to think that, okay, I'm here running a platform for like multiple tenants within my company, and you want to have a bit more security of who can do what, the secure token services becomes important. But it is not a blocker, right? You can deploy the platform, and we did deploy the platform on all these 4 providers. And But so indeed, in that sense, so the platform that Niels presented a moment ago does work on all of these four. And then after this platform worked there, we thought to ourselves like, hey, how about we explore some enterprisey features that our typical clients would require besides a working platform, right? So we have also kind of non-functionals here. So one of the things would be that you have your on-prem loads, you have your on-prem databases, you have or maybe other databases elsewhere. You want to connect the cloud provider in a secure manner to your other data sources, let's say. Typically, you would do it with a VPN connection, and all the cloud providers give some kind of VPN. OVH has a star, and we can go into details. But OVH find it interesting because OVH is the only one providing a direct connection. So you can go to OVH and ask them, I want a direct fiber connection to your cloud center, and they can give that. But very, very enterprisey clients on the hyperscalers, they do that as well.
Yeah.
VPN would be a fallback. But anyway, so this aspect was also good on all providers. The data encryption offered on their S3 storage, so the object store, was also, I would say, adequate. Here OVH wins. OVH can manage the keys for you as well. For the others, you have to provide your keys. So that's a bit operationally tricky, because then you really hope that you don't lose your keys, right? Because if you lose your keys, then your platform is a bit stuck. But here, except of OVHcloud, the others, they provide a way to integrate your own keys.
And for people who are less technical, what's wrong with AES 256?
The AES 256, indeed. So AES 256. It's an encryption which prevents a thief entering to OVHcloud premises and taking a hard drive and decrypting it. They can't do that. If I manage my own keys, the SSEC, that means that even OVHcloud employees can't decrypt the data because you own the keys, so they can't decrypt it. So this way you can protect even from, let's say, that the cloud provider would spy on your data.
With AES, technically the OVHcloud employees could decrypt your data.
Indeed, yes.
I'm not saying they would have it.
Indeed, but so they have the technical feasibility. If they have a court order, they can decrypt, while SSEC they can't.
Yeah.
But it's also more hassle, and also more risk. And the fine-grained access control that Niels was a bit touching upon. Exascale and OVHcloud here, you are either an admin or you are nothing. So that's a bit like black and white. OVH and Scaleway are making steps in the correct direction. In both, you can specify some sort of finer grained access control. It's not as detailed as AWS, for example, but you can do things. You can restrict certain roles to be acting only on storage or only on databases or only on these kind of things. So it's not ideal, but it is a step towards.
Yeah. There's a comment here in the chat that says the EU cloud providers may not really be clouds, but more virtual infrastructure providers. Would you agree with that, or would you say, well?
Indeed, you could say that this is more an infra provider, indeed, as opposed as a fully integrated cloud provider. Yes, that is maybe true. But if you look at AWS, AWS is often also considered to be a very good infra provider and a not so good service provider either. But that's already nuances, of course.
Shots fired.
Of course. But indeed, But I would agree. Here, basically, the services end with Kubernetes, and some of them have a bit more on top, but it's ultimately a nice Kubernetes provider.
Yeah, and managed database, managed storage.
Indeed, yes, and not much else.
All right.
I remember in the beginning, a couple of people mentioned cost reasons. Well, for our context, for running the platform, what we would need is typically virtual machines, right? So they are the machines that join your Kubernetes cluster, right? So you would be for sure paying VM costs, right? Mm-hmm. You would be paying some kind of an RDS, so a database cost, right? So that's the middle one, and then you would pay for some object storage, right? So your data on the object store you would be paying for that, right? And here we have an overview about across the cloud providers, and put AWS on the top just for reference. So these are the numbers that you would be paying, let's say, today, and Azure costs are very similar here, right? But so if you look at the pure compute costs, yeah, I mean, okay, OVH is, let's say, 30% cheaper, but it's not, it's not a factor of 10, right?
No, especially since on AWS we use a lot spot instances.
Indeed.
Which cut the price in half or something, depending on the market price. So,
Yeah, indeed. So you could even argue that AWS on spot is actually cheaper than OVH, but of course, not everything is running on spot, and I wouldn't run the Trino workers on spot either. But so there are considerations. It's not so black and white, but even just looking at list prices, yeah, it's not so big of a difference.
Because someone in the chat also mentioned Hetzner, and they are a lot cheaper, right? But they don't offer managed Kubernetes.
Yes. We can come back to that at the end if we have time, because the Hetzner story is very interesting. We were looking into that as well, but it doesn't fit in this presentation. But indeed, Hetzner is cheaper than this.
Someone here says cost relates more to Databricks and Snowflake, and there I 100% agree. Because when we started going to AWS, our main argument was, look how cheap it is compared to on-prem. But now with the full managed service offerings, and Databricks and Snowflake are great services, don't get me wrong, but they're 10 times as expensive. It's insane how expensive they are. So yes, then you're definitely saving costs. But you could argue you can also deploy this stack on AWS, right? So.
Oh, absolutely, right? I mean, so there's nothing wrong. I mean, you can go to AWS, deploy this stack, and you're off. So I mean. But yeah, so maybe another note here that it's, I mean, the comparison is still correct, but it is not it's not 100% match, right? So for example, the virtual machines have a bit different specifications. And of course, in AWS, you get the optimized Graviton processors and this kind of thing. So it's not black and white, but yeah, ballpark, I would say that cost shouldn't be the main driver here. I don't think that you can actually prove it's going to be significantly cheaper than running the same stack elsewhere.
There's two more questions, maybe very deep ones, right? But Fabrice asks, how did you feel about these cloud providers on redundancy or failover capabilities?
We have a slide on that, so we can look at that.
But then let's wait for the slide. And then the other one, also from Fabrice, is the complexity of setting up these components and structure of cloud landing zone can get quite complex, right? Do you feel that these providers offer good APIs or Terraform providers to improve this time to set up?
Landing zone and identities and these kind of things, I think they are not there yet. But I mean, it really depends on what you mean by landing zone. But for example, there is no SSO integration, or at least I haven't found SSO integration between the cloud users and then, for example, a local AD or an on-prem AD users, right? But also, from our perspective, we don't want to give the company employees access to the cloud. I want them to interact with Airflow, and I want them to interact with Trino. I wouldn't want them to go to the UpCloud console and click around,
Yeah, in our case, we would connect Citadel with an external identity provider, which then would be.
So that's their top entry, right? You wouldn't want them to log into the console.
Indeed.
Indeed, but if that's a requirement that people log into console, well, then maybe the only two providers are OVH and Scaleway, which have a bit more in terms of like user permission control mechanisms, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but then coming about the reliability, well, it's really hard to find concrete numbers and such, right? But in the middle, you see the object storage availability SLA. So it's availability. It's not about losing data. It's about the storage being available. And you see that there's some nines and some numbers around, right? But I mean, at least the stated numbers, Scaleway is the worst maybe, but UpCloud has a lot of nines, but then they don't really explicitly say that this is for the storage. They say it for core services, so we don't know what that means.
So, also, I mean, even if they give you back part of your cloud spend while they're down for 2 days, I don't care about this cloud spend. You've been down for 2 days. Right?
Indeed. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's chargeback. It is AWS does it as well. Like if it is down, you get your money back. But when you get back what, $5? I mean, to store a terabyte per month is $5 or no, $10, right?
Exactly.
It does not mean. But for example, the other indicator we wanted to look at is a Postgres technical lag. So it is basically the lag behind the open source version. Because it is we don't really mind 16 or 17, but we were just curious how much up to date these providers are. And I would say that they're all fairly up to date. I mean, Scaleway has 16, but okay, it's not that they are running version 13 or something, right? So I would say they're fairly up to date on these services as well. You know, you can't really complain that this is running some ancient version. No, it is quite okay. And the Kubernetes technical lag, so we were using Kubernetes, so we looked at that as well. OVHcloud is 2 versions behind. There is probably movement on that front as well, but
if you look at that in time difference, that's about 6 months, 6 to 9 months in time delay that they have from when the version was released. So the 32 was about 3-4 months ago, if I'm correct. Just to give an idea, okay, they're not fully up to date, but they're also not years behind.
Indeed. And they're all very functional Kubernetes clusters. So I mean, if you log into the cluster with an administrator to do things, I mean, it's a cluster just like the AWS cluster or an Azure cluster, right? So in that sense, this looks okay. But what we didn't look at, so obviously what we did here, we deployed this thing, we spent some weeks on this, we poked around, but we were not running really production workloads here, right? We don't really know how is the actual perceived uptime. We don't know how often the Kubernetes nodes do go down. I mean, they go down also on AWS, don't get me wrong. but so I mean, we don't know how often does this happen, right? How often would you have an interruption in your computation jobs, you know? We also don't know what is the experience of upgrading Kubernetes, right? I mean, they provide an update path, but we haven't tried how is it or how bad or how good it is. On AWS, I know it is a non-trivial matter, but it's also streamlined. So I don't know. I haven't upgraded an OVH cluster yet to see how that will work. Backups, for example, all the Postgres that I mentioned previously, they offer managed backups. They offer managed even hourly snapshots. But I haven't tried to roll one back to see how well it actually works. So these kind of like more non-functionalities, we haven't dived deeper. These are important enterprise features for sure, but we haven't tried those. So this could be a bit topic of a further investigation to see.
But the best way to find this out is of course running production workloads, and then as long as we do this for our learning experience ourselves, then it's difficult to get really to these details.
Indeed. But I mean, here I would suggest that whoever is actually interested, I mean, they obviously have already a solution elsewhere to spin up a parallel load, right? You put 10% of your load in parallel onto one of the EU cloud providers, and then you see how bad or how good it is, right? Because otherwise, it's very hard to give like overall measurements. And we were thinking about, remember, Kris, we were thinking about running TPC.
TPCH or TPCDS benchmarks, that could still be a good thing to try, but that's mainly to gauge performance, not really the stability. Is to see, well, if you look at the performance, we look at cost. Do you get the same performance for that cost, or is there a significant difference between what the VMs at an AWS and the bandwidth that they have versus what you could get on an EU cloud? So that might be still something we investigate later.
Yeah, indeed. But I think that brings us to the demo part of the presentation.
Yeah, there's some more questions, but I want to make sure that we do the demo as well, and we can go back to the questions.
Sure.
So in the presentation, we showed the link to a Git repo, which you can all find and all use, where we basically have the bare bones setup of this platform. We made it available there. So let's just walk you a bit through it. There you see, well, we have an infra site where you see the basic infrastructure for every cloud. As an example, I will take Scaleway, and then you see, okay, what do we provision from Scaleway? Well, all what you expect. We need some blob storage. We need a database. This is all very similar as configuring it on AWS. We need a VPC, and then we set up the Kubernetes cluster. And then you configure, okay, which version is it? What are the node pools? You can specify what's the CNI. So all these things that you expect, you could specify. Of course, if you do this on a US hyperscaler, you get a lot more knobs to turn. You have a lot more configuration options. So here it's limited in a sense. You don't have all the configuration that you will want, but you have enough to get working. Then, of course, since we provision all of these bare bones infrastructure, we also need to put some secrets available for the applications we will deploy later on to Kubernetes to basically find where is the database, what's the endpoint, what are the credentials for logging into the database. So those are then configured as well. You see here, yeah, the registry is added. So this is what would be the bare bones platform from which we start. And then on top of that, we need to deploy the applications. And in the example that we do this here is using Argo CD. So you have the bootstrap of your data platform is basically your Argo CD bootstrap. It installs Argo CD and looks basically at a repo to see, okay, which applications do I need to deploy? And then the applications, they are found here in the Argo apps folder. And there you see all the technologies that we have described on our stack. They are here. So you have traffic, you have Airflow, you have your Vault, you have Lakekeeper, Trino, OPA, and Citadel. So all the applications, together with the configuration that they need. So this is agnostic of the platform. The only thing what you would probably, and it's in the README described in more details, that is, of course, you want some SSL, you want a domain, so you need to configure your domain correctly depending on where you host it. This would change, but all the rest of the settings you could use as a starting point to deploy this platform and to test it out yourself. So, okay, so we have our applications on top of the infrastructure you need. Yeah, then the last thing is, of course, we wanted to run some pipelines. So we said that, sorry, it's not this one. So we wanted to run some ETL jobs. So we created some simple dbt jobs that we would like to schedule through Airflow. And then you see that Airflow, in our case, is configured to look at the Git repo. So it looks at these DAGs that exists. Here you see then the DAGs of what will be running, and that contains then the code that is described here in the dbt job. The details are, you can look at it yourself. It's not that important, but just to show that it's fully end-to-end a running platform that can do the SQL processing. So that's what the demo was. And then maybe for people who are curious, I showed a bit of the infra of Scaleway, just to give a bit of an idea. Okay, we're all used probably to either the Azure portal or the AWS console. How would, for example, the Scaleway console look? So here you see, well, I configured the Postgres into the Amsterdam region. So this looks fairly, it's a bit different than the AWS console, but it looks fairly similar. And if you look at the Kubernetes cluster that is deployed, it's also in the Amsterdam region. You see a lot of the same concepts coming back as you would use to the AWS console. I think look and feel wise of this console, it's fairly similar. Of course, there's, you see the left bar. If you would click open the applications or the managed services that AWS has, you have a list of a couple of hundred. Here you have maybe 50 or 60. So the list is way shorter. But apart from that, I think the UI is quite snappy and it's quite nice. Although that, as we are data engineers, we always use the Terraform providers to spin this up, and we don't really use the console, but just to give you an idea of how this looks. All right, that was the short demo I wanted to show. You can try it out yourself. If you have further questions, please reach out. So our conclusions of this couple of weeks of work that we spent on using these EU clouds is that they are in a better shape than we expected. Maybe it could be that our bar were way lower, but we found that we could build and deploy the same modern data platform on any of these cloud providers. Of course, there are some things you need to do more work here than you would do on any of the US hyperscaler, because you need to manage more yourself. But you can get it up and running. the key differentiator or the key service that we really leverage here is Kubernetes. As we have already mentioned a couple of times, without Kubernetes, well, none of this would have been possible, and there would not be enough services to cover what we would want to build. So Kubernetes is really the key service for us to look for in any of these EU clouds in order to build such a data platform. And then from all the different discussions and also our own experiences, I think we like Scaleway the best. Given that the security is okay, they have the most services that are provided. They have a very good Terraform provider, very good experience. And then OVH is a strong second. A bit better on security. I think also more well known. We didn't look in detail on revenue wise or who's the largest yet. Probably OVH is larger than Scaleway, but I'm not 100% sure. This is purely from our technical experience that we would pick Scaleway. All right.
Yes, indeed.
So that's what we have prepared. The rest is open for questions.
Yeah. Maybe indeed, let's go to the final slide, because before we go back to the questions, we are of course interested in working with other companies on this. So if you're interested, if you think like, yeah, we are looking for a sovereign data solution and I'd like to dive more into what you guys built, then we'd love to collaborate with you. Gergely is leading this on our end, so you can find his email gergely.soti@dataminded.com. We'll also send everyone emails with the recording, with the PowerPoint, with everything. You can just reply to that email as well. I mean, it should be easy to find this, right? So I hope you enjoyed the content. We definitely enjoyed building it, and I'm looking forward to using it a bit more. There is some time left, about 15 minutes for some further Q&A. So if you have more questions, feel free to post them. I propose we go to some of the questions that were asked earlier. If I skipped one, then let me know, guys. Wait, oh, I cannot scroll, sorry. Yeah. Klaus, you asked, like, are they not Gaia X related providers? Maybe I can answer that question. I don't know if you even know what Gaia X is.
That's the European Commission funded project, yeah.
Klaus, we're definitely not experts on Gaia X, but I checked it out, and it's, for me, and I have to be careful, there's a recording here, but it's this typical EU commissioned cloud, right? There is a shit ton of documents. There's a lot of policies and rules on how to collaborate, and it feels more like a lawyer room than a tech room. So maybe you know more about it, and maybe there's some very cool things going on there, but I can't find my way in there. So if you can point me to a data platform that they built in Gaia X and we can use or learn from, I'm happy to do so. But to me, this sounds more like lobbying than actual tech work. I might be wrong again, so please, everyone, tell me you're wrong, Kris, because I do that. But so no, we don't know if they are Gaia X related providers. Let's see.
Maybe just a note. I think that practically OVH is fairly big in France. So I don't know about Gaia X, but OVH, I think, is trying to position himself also as like the public provider in France.
Well, they're more a consortium, right? They don't try to build yet another cloud, but they want to bring all those stakeholders together, like this typical EU consortium thing, where like half of the money goes to consultants. We hate consultants. Other kind, like slide consultants. So, but anyway, I might be wrong. Way more technical question. For real enterprise, you need a SSO integration with different accounts and assume roles between those isolated environments. Does anyone have something like this?
Yeah, so we touched. Gergely touched upon this. So the scope down roles. Scaleway OVH have some support, but it's by no means as extensive as AWS. They also don't have a secure token service, so you cannot provision temporary credentials, for example, that give you this scoped role for an hour and then go away. So there is limited support for that, and that's also why we positioned the platform as the main users should interact with what the platform supports, because we can restrict these things on a platform level, but if you give them access to the console or to the cloud itself, as you would probably do on a US hyperscaler, it's very difficult to tie down. And it's at the moment not mature enough to give them that kind of access. But if you can put it a bit higher on the platform level, you can restrict this access quite well. And we have good ideas on how to restrict data access on a platform for even Spark and Python applications, etc.
But then maybe from a different perspective. So if the question is more about how to integrate, so Citadel is an integrator as well. So how we use it is that we integrated Citadel with our GitHub identity provider. So Citadel could integrate with your other Active Directory solution, for example, right? So you could today legitimately take our platform and you point Citadel to your own AD, and it would work. So if that was a question, then yes. If the question is mostly about the cloud experience, then unfortunately it's mostly no.
Okay. Well, there's also a link to an OVH data center burning down. I don't know if you.
Yeah, of course. Yes. But I mean, indeed, but things happen, right? But was there any data loss? I don't think there was, because I mean, this is all replicated. So I mean, ultimately, this is their internal kitchen, right? So.
It's like the what is it, 2 years ago, the big flooding in the Paris region of the Google data center, which also brought down a lot of services. So things will happen.
Yeah, indeed. There was also an AWS outage, remember, in US East a while ago. Half the website, half the internet was down. So things happen, right?
But I think it's fair to say, would you disagree, that EU providers like OVH are less mature in that? Or you disagree?
I don't think if they would lose objects, I mean, services out for sure. But if they would lose data, I would be very surprised. Because those SLAs that we quoted there are some 9s that were what was for availability.
Yeah, not for persistence.
Indeed, they didn't quote persistence, right? I would be very surprised if they would lose data. But
I know.
Indeed, but I said I mean. If you give a cloud and you lose data, but then how are you better than anything else, right? So,
okay, here I think. Well, I'll ask a question. What is their S3 compatible object storage? Do they have it? Is it MinIO? Do they state that? I guess Iceberg would be heavily reliant on it.
Yeah. So the S3 compatible APIs, they all provide it. How they do it. MinIO is also an S3 compatible, but there are other technologies they could use as well. It's not explicitly provided. I think from a user point of view, what is important is that it's S3 compatible, because you see it in the Terraform providers. You can just point, the endpoint is different, but for the rest, every S3 operation you would want to do with, even if you would use the AWS S3 CLI, if you say, the endpoint is now my OVH endpoint, copy the data there, it works because it is this compatible.
You don't care what happens behind the API as long as the API works.
That's true. Yeah. So I mean, but that's how we use Trino. We also tell Trino, hey, this is the endpoint, and go. And Trino thinks it's an AWS. Or it's
S3.
Yes.
But I don't. They don't state, or at least not what I found. I know that OVH is running OpenStack now. I don't know if MinIO is part of OpenStack. That I don't know. Sorry, I should have looked it up. But so at least they run OpenStack. So I don't know if that is helpful with this, but I don't know what the others are running. Because I know that OVH exposes some of the OpenStack IDs in some cases.
But also you shouldn't care. I think you use the services they provide, and the services can be crap or good or whatever. But I don't care. You know that do you know how that happens behind the scenes? Or maybe you do. On AWS, but all the again, I'm showing here that I'm not technical anymore. But the whole, what was it, firecracker thing about how to run? So who cares about that? Jesus Christ! You just use the service, right?
But indeed.
But it is therefore it is important that this API is supported, because indeed all the things that we use, also the Iceberg, the integration with our data catalog, it relies on the fact that S3 API is supported, because without that, the whole stack would fall down, because they are both the compute engine and the data catalog, they implement a version for S3. So that's why it's also very powerful that they provide these compatible APIs.
There's a good remark from Mathieu again. Mathieu says, the biggest obstacle I see to overcome is that no one ever got fired for choosing Azure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But that's why I think we had the intro discussion about that. Like, I think it would be very hard sell to go to EU providers. They're not cheaper, or not significantly cheaper. They are feature poor, let's say.
Yeah.
Right? So the main reason is regulatory, backup, and like you said, and then vendor lock-in, right?
Yeah.
So that has to be the mindset. I mean,
if you don't care about regulatory
Yeah.
or vendor lock-in or having a backup, then don't look at them, right? Don't go for IONOS.
I mean, you could be an EU patriot and you could say, I want to work with EU clouds, and that's fine. I personally run my stuff on OVH as well because I said that AWS is rich enough. I'm going to stick with OVH, But it's my personal decision, So, and everybody is free to make their choices, but for an entity, for an enterprise, right? I mean,
if you're a large bank,
yeah, indeed,
you have to make a case that yeah.
But coming back to large banks, but there I would way more look at the regulatory things. A bank, if AWS pulls the plug and the bank goes down, I mean, I know it's a very hypothetical thing, but it's a bank.
Well,
Right?
it's probably not AWS pulling the plug in there. I don't want to go into politics, but it could be a president, right? A random president somewhere for naming names.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that the larger and the more established you are, I think that the more you need to look at potential risks and potential mitigations, right? A little company, I mean, you can have million things to go bankrupt, but for a bank, if it goes bankrupt for such an absurd reason, that shouldn't be the reason to go bankrupt. You should go bankrupt because of business, not because of
go.
yeah, indeed. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. We have a few minutes left. I'm going to race through the rest here. Can you speak, Louis asks, can you speak a bit more about the choice of Argo CD versus Helm file or other?
It was just a personal preference. A lot of our colleagues have experience with Argo CD. You could do the same with a plain Helm file. You could use a Terraform to launch a Helm file. It's a personal preference. No, there's no explicit reasoning for doing this.
It was just indeed. I mean, it's not really core component of the platform. You can use whatever you want, but we just have Argo, just because we have familiar.
Okay. Then also a question: do you look at other data warehouse alternatives like Starrocks or other versus Trino? I think we looked at ClickHouse at some point, but I don't know if you did. But
for this exercise, no. Because we knew Trino and we know it works, and if we knew it, we could make it work, right? Of course, there's other solutions out there, but so no bots. This is what we tried. This we knew it works. I mean, pretty sure it would work with other technologies as well. The advantage of Trino would be the decoupling of compute and storage.
Yes,
but probably others do that as well. I cannot.
But that's for us a very important one. If you also want to support Spark workloads, you need to have a storage on plain blob storage in order to be able to switch the compute to whatever. Could be a DuckDB, could be a PySpark, could be just your Python that where you run some Polar jobs. So we wanted to keep that open. So the storage should be separate from the compute engine that we use. And then we chose Trino for some of the niceties we discussed, and the credential pass-through. The integration with also Lakekeeper is quite nice.
Yeah. But there might be other tools out there.
Well, there's definitely other tools out there. No, we're not married to any one of them, but there's indeed, we had good experiences with Trino at a client. We've run this in production. So, but I'm sure like another consultant can come in and say, we had good experiences with ClickHouse at a client, and they're also right?
Yeah,
so
indeed.
Someone mentioned Duck Lake as well, that thingy to look into. I don't know if you.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of DuckDB. In the whole Duck Lake discussion, I find it interesting, but it's not enterprise ready, in my opinion. If you look at how would you secure it, how would you give it access, how does the credential work? So for me, the Duck Lake is a very interesting evolution, and I want to see where it goes, but I would not use this in production.
Yeah.
Mainly for, there are some things that I'm unsure about how to secure it and how to.
Okay. All right. I think we're reaching the end. There's a few more things, but we have to wrap up because it's 1. I want to thank everyone again for joining in. Again, feel free to reach out, Gergely, Soti at Dataminded.com, or just find us. Check out the code. I posted the link again. We'll also share the video. We'll share the slides. thanks a lot for the interactivity. I like that there were so many questions. That made it very interesting for us as well.
Yeah.
And then thank you, Gergely and Niels.
Well, thanks for having us, and thanks for joining, guys.
All right, cool.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.